Okay. Right on. Here we go. CJ, my friend, I will kick it to you to get us started.
Not me speaking with my mic off. It's early. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Youth Outreach Training. My name is CJ. I'm from the House of Hope. And as you know, Alex is from the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness. Do we want to switch the next page? There we go. Okay, thank you, Alex. So the training, I'm sure you all know why you're here today, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The training is provided in collaboration with Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness in the House of Hope. And today we're going to be focusing on youth experiencing homelessness and their complex needs ranging from access to shelter and housing, obviously other basic needs, to those with lived experience in the foster care system, and the issues involving secondary education. I'll probably discuss that a little briefly. I don't think we have many slides for that particular topic. But we will also be discussing engaging youth experiencing homelessness via street outreach, different approaches to street outreach, and the best practices that exist for working with youth in general. And then lastly, we'll be providing some hard-hitting data. Well, Alex will be providing the hard-hitting data and statistics, as well as how to work with youth from a trauma-informed and harm reduction perspective. Some of the learning objectives that we're hoping you'll get out of today's training is, there's a few of them there, is to understand the specific dynamics and needs of youth experiencing homelessness, understand the nuances of youth-focused street outreach, understand where outreach is happening and who is doing the street outreach work, and as well as understand the best practices to working with youth actively in crisis and our youth with history of trauma. So we're hoping that you can take some helpful information and best practices away from today's training that will help you then implement that into your daily lives in terms of what you do for work. So that is the overview.
So just wanted to introduce ourselves a little bit so you can get to know us as presenters and why we're here and why we are the ones presenting this to you. So my name is Alex. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am the statewide street outreach coordinator at the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness. I have been working in homelessness and with folks that are unsheltered since 2015. I worked at a all men's emergency overnight shelter for about 1.5 years. I have worked with adults that are experiencing street homelessness, youth experiencing street homelessness. I've worked with youth in foster care. I've worked with, all types of youth, all types of adults. And now I work at the coalition. I got my MSW in May of 2020 with a macro lens, so focusing on policy administration and program development. So more of the bigger picture type of stuff. So, and all of that aside, I am a dog person, but I am a cat dad ×2. We have my partner and I have a 5-year-old cat, and we rescued a kitten not too long ago. She's 6 months old and she is an absolute terror, but we love her anyway. She's adorable. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. CJ, my man, you're on mute again.
I'm just going to stay off mute and be quiet. So if we can just go back, Alex.
I'm working on it.
Oh.
Ignore me. There we go.
It's okay. So yes, my pronouns are he, him, his. I currently serve as the youth case manager at the House of Hope. And then I also founded the charity Generous Heart almost 2 years ago. So we're working diligently on that end as well. Over the last decade, I have worked in various capacities, working with children and families, children experiencing foster care involvement, youth with juvenile justice involvement, very involved in the community in terms of activism and direct action and being out there in the streets, kind of seeing what's going on. But I'm also a consumer of a lot of the systems that we exist to kind of help change. So, you know, I come with a lot of lived experience, and thankfully kind of stepped over a lot of those statistics in my kind of upbringing in life. So I'm grateful for that. I'm currently attending RIC as a BSW student. And like I said, I have 25 plus years lived experience and then 10 plus years professional and working in the human service industry and serving youth and families.
All right, everybody's favorite topic is data, right? We put this at the beginning because we wanted to really hit home with some hard-hitting figures and also kind of get it out of the way, because I know it's not everyone's favorite topic like it is mine, because I'm a nerd. So we're going to start here with the point in time count. So what the point in time count is a count of folks that are sheltered and unsheltered experiencing homelessness on a single night in January. It is required by the Office of Housing and Urban Development, aka HUD. They require it by all continuums of care, aka COCs, and they require it every year, and they usually, the thought behind doing it in January is that most folks will be inside somewhere in January. They will either have found shelter or found a family member or someone to stay with, so there won't be that many people staying outside. However, that's not true. There are lots of people staying outside in the winter because there are no other options. So this is a snapshot right here, this little graph here for trends for our TAY youth ages 18 to 24 over the last 5 years. So, excuse me, the last point in time count we conducted was January 26th, 2022 this year. There was a total of 1,577 total persons counted. Of those, there was 101 young adults. In 2018, there was only 39 young adults versus 65 this year. So I know that that can be a little confusing. So young adults could be folks that are in that 18 to 24 range, under 30 children as well. So that 65 is the TAY number, so 18 to 24 specifically. So if we're looking at specifically 18 to 24, in the last 5 years, there's been a 66% increase in youth that are experiencing homelessness per the point in time count data just here in Rhode Island. So we wanted to keep with that 5-year window and really look at that data for consistency purposes. So this data, I know it can be a little overwhelming. Don't worry, I'm going to explain it. So this is over time, the age of youth enrolled in a project during each year. So this is data from HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System. So it looks like over time, the age of youth that are entering the system is getting higher and higher. So more and more youth are entering our system. Look at that huge spike in 2021 here, where more youth of every age has entered the system. So 109 18-year-olds, 138 19, 159 20, 186.21, 178.22, 179.23, and 199 24-year-olds entered our system and enrolled in a project that year. And what it means to enroll in a project is just be involved with a service provider and open to them. So there is a little bit of a drop down from 2021 to 2022. So that could be that youth are exiting those programs, moving on, could be any number of things. Unfortunately, the data doesn't tell us why there is the drop. It just shows us the numbers. So I think, it's pretty significant to look at that jump here from 2020 to 2021. Could be a whole number of reasons why there is that huge jump, but I think obviously the COVID-19 pandemic plays a huge part in that. So moving on here, this is looking at household type of youth enrolled in a project. So this blue graph here shows households with children, so youth that are parenting and have children. So over time, we see that it's gradually going up. There's another spike here from 2020 with 188 to 2021, where it's almost 400 households with children entered our system. And this gray graph here is single adults. So if we look at in between 2020 with 254 single adults and 2021, there's 595. That's more than double. That's like 2.3 times more folks that are entering our system. So that is incredibly alarming. On the one hand, it's great that our system is capturing the data, capturing the youth. It means that they're engaged. It means that they're connected and they're being accounted for. However, it's horrible and horrifying and awful that our youth are entering the system at all and even have to be accounted for. So here we have gender of youth enrolled. I know it can be a little bit hard to see, but this green section right here is youth that identify as female. So I really wanted to point out this graph. So we all know that Rhode Island is its own unique little space in the world, but within just this graph right here, it's 50% folks that identify as female. And that is really unusual for any state, for any subpopulation of folks experiencing homelessness to identify more than 50% as female for anything other than domestic violence. So, I mean, it doesn't really, the data doesn't tell us why. So we can only wonder if it means that there are, if any of our folks that are identifying as male are folks that identify as transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary, are just being severely undercounted. It could be all of those things. So I just wanted to really point out that interesting piece. And again, note the huge jumps from 2020 to 2021. And note that our numbers from 2021 to 2022 are going back down, which could be any number of things: youth, self-resolving their homelessness, exiting our systems for good reasons. So here we have race. We have majority of our youth that are enrolled are identifying as white. Again, from 2020 to 2021, it more than doubles from 232 to 528. Our next highest is multiracial with 137 from 2020 to 327. Next, we have ethnicity of youth enrolled. And our highest percentage here is those that are identify as non-Hispanic or non-Latino. And from 2020 to 2021, from 296 to 691. It's just a incredibly alarming number, 691. Okay, so youth entering projects by year and by project type. So there's lots of colors here. So these are all the different types of projects that youth are enrolled in. So we have transitional housing, street outreach, services only. So any type of program that just offers services that could be like basic needs, going in and getting toiletries, lunch, all that type of stuff. Rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, housing with services only, housing only, homelessness prevention, emergency shelter, day shelter, and coordinated entry. Our biggest color here, excuse me, is coordinated entry. So that means that over time, since 2018 to now, over the last 5 years, more folks are entering coordinated entry. More folks are being captured and enrolled and connected with all those types of services. So there is an uptick in every single one of these. So every year follows the trend. So as each year goes on, each of these programs spikes in which, like how many folks are enrolled, except for this dip here from 2019 to 2020. So youth by CLS. CLS is their current living situation. So we have couch surfing or hotel is this green graph right here. Housed is this blackish gray. Institutional, sheltered, unknown, or unsheltered. So most youth are either, from this graph, it looks like most youth are either unsheltered, meaning they are outside, presumably, or couch surfing. So hopping between friend's house, family member's house, hotel, motel, not staying in one place for too long. So there is a enormous jump from 2020 to 2021, from 120 to 560. But again, we see a drop from then to 2022. And I just want to note here that how much better, I don't think that's great English, but how much better data collection we have from 2018 to 2020. It's not great to see those numbers rise again, because that means that more youth are entering our system. However, it means that more youth are being captured. They're being connected. Someone has eyes on them. And yeah, so enough about data. I will end it there. But I do want to talk about the different types of homelessness as categorized by HUD. So there are 4 categories of homelessness. There is category 1, which is literally homeless, living in a place not meant for human habitation. So that could be a car, outside, unsheltered, an abandoned building, anywhere that has, doesn't have running water, heat, that's not meant for human habitation. It could also be a shelter, a hotel, anything like that. Category 2 is imminent risk of homelessness. So that is somebody who will lose their primary nighttime residence within 14 days. Category 3 is homeless under other federal statutes. So this one is kind of complicated. Unaccompanied youth under the age of 25 or families with children who do not otherwise qualify as homelessness. These are typically folks that have like persistent housing instability. And I think it's categorized within like the preceding 60 days if they have 2 or more moves. So if they move from place to place 2 or more times within the last 60 days, they're under category 3. It's a little bit confusing, I know. And then category 4 is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. And that also includes so domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, physical abuse, all of those things fall under that umbrella. And we wanted to include this slide because you'll see this little asterisk here for category 3. This is mostly where our youth fall, is under category 3. They don't usually fall under any of the other categories because they might not be literally homeless. They might not be outside yet. They might not be at imminent risk. You know, it might not be 14 days. They are often couch surfing from place to place. So because they don't fall under category 1, 2, or 4, which is where most programs get their federal funding from, youth are not accurately captured. They're not able to receive the same services as most of our system because our system only funds those that are homeless by definition and category of 1, 2, and 4. So we really wanted to highlight that there are these 4 categories and our youth are falling under category 3, which almost no program in our system receives funding for category for serving folks that are category 3 homeless. Okay. I'm going to stop here and turn it over to CJ for a little bit.
Thanks, Alex, for sharing those statistics and data. So Outreach 101 is the process of building a personal connection. It's essentially, you know, meeting people where they're at, right? So helping to play that, play a role in helping a person improve their health status, their housing situation, their social support network. I like to call it systems navigation support. But going out into the community and meeting people where they're at is really like the key to Outreach 101. That's what outreach is. Everything else kind of comes secondary, right? So it's the offering of the support. What does that support look like? Well, it might be a connection to community resources, connection to some basic needs, right? Helping to meet those basic needs, especially as we change in different seasons. So we're going right now, we're in fall now, kind of going into winter. It's getting colder out in the morning and at night. So you're going to see some of those needs kind of increase in terms of, you know, needing things to keep warm, blankets, etc. So that's kind of the offering support piece, right? Creating those relationships. I want to call I think that kind of ties into establishing trust and even building a rapport, because all 3 of those kind of combined into what building a relationship is, or what that looks like, especially with young people. Young people are standoffish at the very beginning, right? They probably have no hope in the system. They probably feel forgotten. They probably have been let down by folks who, you know, come in with a badge and have every good intention to help, but just at the end, it doesn't work out. And so building those relationships, those trusting relationships with youth, authentic, those are really key into whether or not you're going to be successful into in helping those young people in their situation. Because once a young person doesn't trust you as a service provider, they're not going to engage with you anymore. So establishing trust and building rapport is key to creating and maintaining those relationships. Connecting folks with resources and services in a professional, responsible manner. I think that speaks for itself. I don't have to tell folks on here what a professional, responsible manner is, but there you have it. Engaging in a non-judgmental way. So that engaging in a non-judgmental way, though it's so easy to say and do in most cases, some of us kind of, without whether we know it or not, might hold some form of bias for some situation or a particular issue. It's important that we recognize and we're self-aware of any bias when we're working with young people. Bias about family, bias about independence, bias about whatever it is that you believe outside of your professional role, because that's going to help you engage in a very non-judgmental and unbiased manner. And then actively listening. You know, in my experience, and I think Alex can relate, is that when we first encounter a young person, whether it's on the street or in our office, they have a story to tell and they want to tell it. And they can go on for 45 minutes telling you this story about what's going on and what led them to you. Just listen. Oftentimes that even kind of helps create that first relationship, that initial, gives them also, it creates the first relationship, but it also helps them get a sense of how you're going to be moving forward, right, as an active listener. So listen to understand, but not to always reply. Yeah. Alex, it's you, me.
Yep. I can do this one. That's fine. So where is outreach happening? Outreach is happening statewide. So right here we have 5 biggest catchment points, and who is providing those outreach services. So in Providence and Providence County, we have the House of Hope, Amos House, and Better Lives Rhode Island that are doing outreach, funded to do outreach, have a strong presence. In Pawtucket and Central Falls, we have House of Hope. In Woonsocket, we have Community Care Alliance. In the Warwick, West Warwick, Cranston area, we have House of Hope again. And in Westerly and Washington County, there's Warm and Welcome House. Warm and Welcome House have now merged. So we wanted to highlight this. This is mostly our, well, I don't want to say like adult street outreach providers because, you know, 18 to 24, technically they are adults. But these folks are funded to do outreach. There is several unfunded orgs that are doing outreach, kind of on their own, like rogue little groups that are doing their own things. We have a lot of harm reduction partners as well that do outreach, like Parent Support Network and Project Weber Renew do a lot of outreach to folks that are actively using substances. And there is a lot of overlap between folks that use substances and folks that are experiencing homelessness. So those folks are not on this list for many reasons, because, well, one, because they're not funded to do outreach, but their focus is not homelessness. And it's really important that we recognize that and don't treat our harm reduction folks as homeless outreach experts as well, just because there's that overlap. They have a lot going on with folks that are experiencing substance use disorders, all of the overdoses that are happening in the state right now. So we are very mindful about our partnerships with them, between homeless street outreach and harm reduction street outreach, that yes, there is that overlap and there is that collaboration, but there has to be that perfect balance of working together, but not overburdening them as well. All right, CJ, back to you.
Sure. So youth street outreach and case management. I'm certain there's a couple others that are not listed on this slide, but starting with the HYPE program here at the House of Hope, which I'm a case manager for. Our program is really everything we just discussed, right? Like meeting youth where they're at, recognizing the value in their journey, assessing their immediate long-term needs, goals, and strengths, kind of coming up with a goals and action plan, one-on-one case management and crisis mitigation. I say crisis mitigation, and I'm going to give you an example of a crisis mitigation. A couple nights ago, it's well after hours. It's probably 7 o'clock at night. My phone rings, and it's a young person who is having a crisis with a family member, right? So young person visiting family, big argument takes place, and I have to get on the phone, and as her case manager, I have to speak with both the client, but also with mom and say like, hey, you know, let's figure this out. Like, let's not yell over each other. Let's like, you know, I was teaching both parent and youth how to communicate with one another so that this didn't explode and become, you know, a bigger issue than it already was. So that's in some form, crisis mitigation is also helping with family mediation and systems navigation, right? In addition to that, it's, you know, a young person who's actively experiencing living in their car or in a tent, that's crisis mitigation. That's kind of ongoing, right, throughout the case management. But those are some of the values in the HYPE program is that they receive a one-on-one case manager who can kind of be with them every step of the way, right? Some of the young people that I come up across are oftentimes not equipped with the life skills required to thrive. And these are young kids, you know, these are like, you know, 19, 20-year-olds, right? So we shouldn't expect them to come with that knowledge. And when there's a lack of social emotional support, you find that the demand falls a little greater on you as the case manager. So, but that's what HYPE offers. Then there's Foster Forward Drop-In Center, which I'm sure everyone on this meeting is familiar with Foster Forward. Their drop-in center is open Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 to 3 p.m. They have a great team of people there who can support young people along with the various issues they may be experiencing. It's not, I don't believe it's always been, I don't want to say it's only for foster youth. I've seen young people that aren't or don't come with foster care involvement going to the drop-in center. But most of the youth that they serve have experience in the foster care system. We do have a HYPE team member who's typically at this location from 12 to 3 Wednesdays and Fridays, as well as on call during those drop-in center hours, Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. And so if there isn't a HYPE person there, we're always reachable by phone. Foster Forward knows that, and we only are like one exit away from them. So that's their main phone number. If you have young people with history of foster care involvement or just in need of additional places to go, you can send them right to Foster Forward for those days. They have laundry services there. They have a food pantry there, and various other resources that they can help you with. Transition age youth. So this is often a topic that we don't always hear about when we're discussing homelessness. At least I know I have not heard much about transition age youth outside of the Transition Age Youth Committee. But those individuals are generally between the ages of 16 and 25, often with health and wellness challenges, that are transitioning from child serving systems to adult serving systems. What are child serving systems? Well, for example, BCYS. adult serving systems would include, House of Health, these kind of systems that we work with. Let's see. So I took some transition age youth outcomes from the National Youth and Transition Database. And let's just talk about it for a little bit before I get into additional findings. There are indications that in some outcome areas, young adults are struggling. Yeah, we get that. But as they age, an increasing proportion of youth reported experiencing homelessness, giving birth to or fathering a child, and not having any health insurance. We see that come through HYPE all of the time. These findings may help underscore the importance of providing supports to youth who may be particularly vulnerable to certain outcomes. And so we can move on to the next slide. So what are adverse childhood experiences? I do want to know for the folks on here, have you heard of adverse childhood experiences before? You can just unmute your mic and say yes or no. I kind of want to know.
No.
No.
I have.
Okay. Some have, some haven't. All right, no worries. Well, I'll teach you a little bit about it today. And we're going to watch a short video. We all like videos, right? About adverse childhood experiences. But the term ACE is used to refer to potentially traumatic events that can have lasting negative effects on a youth's health and well-being. Examples of ACEs include emotional abuse, emotional neglect, household mental illness, parental separation, and household substance abuse. We can even throw in domestic violence as a part of that. There is clear evidence that links ACEs and the risk of experiencing homelessness. The knowledge of ACEs can also be used in the development of strategic programs that target homelessness from a prevention-based perspective. And so as we continue on discussing ACEs and even afterward, feel free to start researching ACEs and those ways in which it can be used in the development of those strategic programs, because it will definitely benefit your program or your employer or agency. So yes, okay. So I added the link there for this infographic, which I hope maybe we can put that in the chat. But it talks about how the ACE score is in relation to adult homelessness. Really, really interesting stuff. And there's even some additional resources there from Harvard and SAMHSA. But it's definitely eye-opening because as somebody with lived experience, right? My experience with adverse childhood experiences is pretty significant. And so these statistics always speak to my heart about the trajectory in which I could have gone if I had not received the supportive services that I received. So feel free, I don't know if we can put that in the chat, but feel free to look that, we'll put it in later for everyone, to look at that infographic. I would like us to watch this video on childhood trauma. It's just a short video that talks about ACEs. Lots of ads.
I'm going to mute it because I am over it. You guys can
right?
see the YouTube page, right?
We couldn't hear it though before that. So I don't know if you're sharing your sound.
I
think the sound's off YouTube.
Okay, let's see. How about now?
Yep.
Great.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview, Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC. And together, they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you know, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand better than we ever have before how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information threw my old training out the window, because when we understand the mechanism of a disease, when we know not only which pathways are disrupted, but how, then as doctors, it is our job to use this science for prevention and treatment. That's what we do. So in San Francisco, we created the Center for Youth Wellness to prevent, screen, and heal the impacts of ACEs and toxic stress. We started simply with routine screening of every one of our kids at their regular physical, because I know that if my patient has an ACE score of 4, she's 2.5 times as likely to develop hepatitis or COPD. She's 4.5 times as likely to become depressed, and she's 12 times as likely to attempt to take her own life as my patient with 0 ACEs. I know that when she's in my exam room. For our patients who do screen positive, we have a multidisciplinary treatment team that works to reduce the dose of adversity and treat symptoms using best practices, including home visits, care coordination, mental health care, nutrition, holistic interventions, and yes, medication when necessary. But we also educate parents about the impact of ACEs and toxic stress the same way you would for covering electrical outlets or lead poisoning. And we tailor the care of our asthmatics and our diabetics in a way that recognizes that they may need more aggressive treatment given the changes to their hormonal and immune systems. So the other thing that happens when you understand this science is that you want to shout it from the rooftops, because this isn't just an issue for kids in Bayview. I figured the minute that everybody else heard about this, it would be routine screening, multidisciplinary treatment teams, and it would be a race to the most effective clinical treatment protocols. Yeah, that did not happen. And that was a huge learning for me. What I had thought of as simply best clinical practice, I now understand to be a movement. In the words of Dr. Robert Block, the former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. And for a lot of people, that's a terrifying prospect. The scope and scale of the problem seems so large that it feels overwhelming to think about how we might approach it. But for me, that's actually where the hope lies. Because when we have the right framework, when we recognize this to be a public health crisis, then we can begin to use the right toolkit to come up with solutions. From tobacco to lead poisoning to HIV/AIDS, the United States actually has quite a strong track record with addressing public health problems. But replicating those successes with ACEs and toxic stress is going to take determination and commitment. And when I look at what our nation's response has been so far, I wonder, why haven't we taken this more seriously? You know, at first, I thought that we marginalized the issue because it doesn't apply to us, right? That's an issue for those kids in those neighborhoods, which is weird because the data doesn't bear that out. The original ACEs study was done in a population that was 70% Caucasian, 70% college educated. But then, the more I talk to folks, I'm beginning to think that maybe I had it completely backwards. If I were to ask how many people in this room grew up with a family member who suffered from mental illness, I bet a few hands would go up. And then if I were to ask how many folks had a parent who maybe drank too much, or who really believed that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child, I bet a few more hands would go up. Even in this room, this is an issue that touches many of us. And I'm beginning to believe that we marginalize the issue because it does apply to us. Maybe it's easier to see in other zip codes because we don't want to look at it. We'd rather be sick. Fortunately, scientific advances and frankly, economic realities make that option less viable every day. The science is clear. Early adversity dramatically affects health across the lifetime. Today, we are beginning to understand how to interrupt the progression from early adversity to disease and early death. And 30 years from now, the child who has a high ACE score and whose behavioral symptoms go unrecognized, whose asthma management is not connected, and who goes on to develop high blood pressure and early heart disease or cancer, will be just as anomalous as a 6-month mortality from HIV/AIDS. People will look at that situation and say, what the heck happened there? This is treatable. This is beatable. The single most important thing that we need today is the courage to look this problem in the face and say, this is real and this is all of us. I believe that we are the movement. Thank you.
So thank you, Alex, for putting that on for us. So I just want to share briefly, the reason I had everyone watch this video is because when you're encountering youth in most cases that come from a history of adverse childhood experiences. And so it's not more to get you to understand why they're experiencing or they're dealing with certain things like health-related outcomes, but it's more so to educate you that when you're going in to speak with a young person or to meet a young person, think about all of this in the back of your mind, right? And try to help, try to allow that to help guide your thinking in terms of how your approach looks to helping to solve their crisis, or at least mitigate it. So this is mind-blowing. When I first heard about this, and I've spoken on this subject now at both Brown University and Salve Regina, and it's something that is just kind of starting to really come up in Rhode Island, but I found it just so mind-blowing, and I hope that you guys took something away from this video today. I'm also going to put in the chat for you at a later time the ACE quiz. I believe it's 10 questions, and you can take that for yourself, or you can share it with somebody else, but it's a nice way to assess your own scores. Trauma-informed care. So trauma-informed, this is a perfect segue, Alex, just a perfect segue. Trauma-informed care, TIC, is an overarching structure and treatment attitude that emphasizes understanding, compassion, and responding to the effects of all types of trauma. TIC also looks at physical, psychological, and emotional safety for both client and providers, and provides tools to empower folks on the pathway to stability. That link there it's resource to trauma-informed guiding principles for working with transition-age youth. It's a provider fact sheet. If we can put that in the chat, that would be great. Folks can can we actually just click on that, Alex? I want to pull that up and see if it's. Yeah, so we can, I think we could just put the link in there, that's fine, but this fact sheet is, I think it's really helpful for providers to be modeling their approach after, and making sure that they're going along with the current best practices in terms of trauma-informed approaches. So some helpful data in here. You can see down there, actually, if you want to go down a moment, you can see right here the challenges often experienced by TAY youth. It talks about some unemployment, some issues with education, but 44% of homeless youth had spent time in jail, prison, or juvenile detention centers. So some of these are also helpful to kind of to read and understand more. So I'm thinking we could put that link in the chat, and folks can on their own time or after the meeting, check it out, download it. Nice. So before we move on, can we just go back one more? Before we move on, I wanted to mention when it comes to trauma-informed care. So I don't know if you recall in the beginning, I said at some point I'm going to talk about educational outcomes. And there was a recent study that or report that was just released in Rhode Island the other day that has a lot of service providers who work with young people, transition age youth, or just young people in general, really shocked at the educational outcomes of this population. And I'll just share some brief information. You can look it up at another time, but 44% of Rhode Island K through 12 students with foster care involvement between 2010 and 22 graduate high school. And for the first time ever, after legislation had kind of been put into action, the Department of Education and DCYF have combined data to discover how students in foster care are performing in school. There's a full finding coming out in November, but basically the study shows that 2 out of 5 graduate high school since 2010 compared to 70% of public school students. And that out of the $330 million in ARPA funds, no district in the state of Rhode Island has spent funds from that ARPA to help students with foster care involvement. And so the requirement or the hope is that these districts will now file remediation plans to address the systemic failure of foster youth. And so that fits into transition age youth. And I wanted to share that because while we're working with youth, we should be doing our best to encourage and to support and to assist youth with obtaining an education. That is a part of it. You know, the Band-Aid approach is good sometimes, and then other times it's not always the most helpful. And so when we're working with young people on the street who are homeless, whether they're transition age youth, whether they're from foster care or not, we should always be entertaining the option of education while we work to secure their housing. And even keeping it as a goal, a long-time goal when we develop goal plans and action plans, because these statistics are actually very disappointing for Rhode Island as it pertains to the way in which we support foster youth and their education. And this system sets them up for failure. And so I wanted to just share some of that with you. It recently came out on WPRI. I know that Rhode Island Kids Count had some help in the data. I think it was just released yesterday. So it's fairly new information, but it's shocking and disappointing at the same time. We can move on to the next slide, Alex. Okay, so strengths, hold on a second. Strengthening relationships between providers and youth. So I think we kind of discussed a little bit about that, but basically discuss mutual respect with each other and boundaries, build that trust. That's going to be key. You know, like I said, trauma does not discriminate, right? Youth in foster care, non-youth in foster care, it's there. And youth are coming with their own personal trust issues when it comes to providers. We have to be able to recognize that though we are here for a good cause, these systems in which we work with have hurt our young people and have let them down in more ways than one. So we have to kind of rebuild that trust because they see us in the beginning as just another provider. Helping to identify those individual needs, demonstrating culturally responsive care, empowering youth, and fostering genuineness and strengthening that communication between yourself, young people, and I'm going to put in even helping to foster the strengthening of relationships with family members and whatnot. So this here, you can see this is like actually kind of a screenshot because I didn't want to type all this in, but I wanted to give y'all something to take away when it comes to your own witness of stories and working with experiences with working with TAY youth who have an impact of trauma. So take care, be self-aware, talks this, and we can go through this just briefly, but it talks about developing an awareness to your own experience, right? What do they call that? Vicarious trauma, I think. Am I right? And how, the experience of listening to those stories and witnessing the impact of trauma on young people can take an emotional toll on you and even disrupt your functioning and ability to engage in professional activities. And so when we talk about self-care, I want to remind my colleagues on this training that that is incredibly, incredibly important, that you come up with ways as individuals or providers, strategies to address that secondary trauma. Because that is a real thing. And that's one thing I have had to do, and I'm not ashamed to share with you that as a person with lived experience, having scored 1 point for every point on that adverse childhood experiences study, I every single day find myself, taking self-care, taking time, trying not to become overwhelmed with the fact that I'm not alone, was not alone, and I made it to this seat, but not everyone gets there, right? And so, some of these organizations can implement flexible schedule policies, which I am proud to say House of Hope does have. Providing daycare services, these are just examples, providing access to mental health resources for your employees and your coworkers, offering overall self-care support systems at work. These are all really, really important because like it says in the end, you need to be able to take care of yourself first in order to support TAY, transition age youth. Now, I'm just gonna say, in order to support any young person, you need to be in a place where your trauma is being dealt with, your experiences are not conflicting with the experiences of the youth, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you understand what I'm saying there. Take it away.
Alrighty. So we're gonna get into street outreach. So I have in here a standard street outreach approach that we teach to everyone, whether you are a youth outreach provider, adult outreach provider, and these are just the basics. So always approach folks from the front, keeping appropriate space and non-aggressive posture. So body language is really crucial. You don't want to be talking to somebody with your arms crossed. It's not really an inviting gesture. Youth already aren't trustful of adults, so body language, like, we can really read into that. So if you have an open posture, an inviting demeanor, they're more likely to engage with you. So remain standing, but it's okay to crouch down and speak to someone who's sitting or lying down, but you want to maintain your balance. This is a picture of me from way back when in the day, little baby Alex. So always approach with open-ended questions. It's a little bit easier to get a response. So how's it going? How you doing? Are you warm or cool enough, depending on the season? And if they answer you, identify who you are, your organization, why you're out there, what services are available through your organization. So if you are part of the HYPE team, what the HYPE team does, what HYPE, has available to you, excuse me. And if folks don't want to engage in conversation, that's okay too. A simple hello and a smile can go a long way. Oftentimes it takes time to build that relationship. So, you can see the same person day after day, say hello to them, smile at them every day for a month. That's the extent of your conversation with them. And then, on day 32, they're finally willing to have that conversation with you because you have that consistent presence. They've seen you out there over and over again. You're always saying hello. You're always engaging with them, looking them in the eye. And they are, taking that into account and seeing, okay, like, this person is trustworthy. I can engage with them, all that type of stuff. So also, something that I want to really hit on here, I didn't include it in the slide, but a major factor of outreach is approaching outreach with a housing first approach. And what that means, housing first, is exactly what it sounds like. We put housing first above all else. So we do not require anyone to engage in going to shelter, engaging in substance use treatment, mental health treatment, to either receive street outreach services, engage with our teams, or get into housing. Like, that is housing first. Like, put someone into housing, get 4 walls, a roof, a door that locks around them, and then work on everything else. Once they have a safe place to be, then it's a lot easier to work on everything else. So taking that approach to outreach as well, that, it's not contingent upon anything else. Our youth are already facing barrier after barrier within our system, since our system is mostly geared towards adults. There are not a lot of ways that our youth fit into our system, and so we don't want to create any other unnecessary barriers. So really having that approach of like, there are no requirements for you to engage in X, Y, or Z to receive services from us. So a little bit about what youth street homelessness looks like. CJ, please feel free to jump in on this one with me if there's anything on here that you would like to also cover. But youth don't experience street homelessness the same way that adults are. So they're less visible on a day-to-day or a night-to-night walking outreach shift. You're actually more likely to not see them on that type of shift. Youth are less likely to walk into service-based sites. They're more likely to be couch surfing or staying with friends, moving from place to place. And because of that, they're more at risk of being subjected to sexual abuse, prostitution, sexual exploitation, and severe forms of trafficking. So that constant moving around not only makes it hard for them to find, but it puts them at greater risk for trauma and exploitation. So youth that are experiencing street homelessness are typically going to be in more populated areas during the day. I know here in Rhode Island, a lot of youth hang out at the Providence Place Mall, shopping centers, bus stations, schools. And, once you find one youth, typically you'll find more. That word of mouth can really help you in that sense. Like I said, that day-to-day, night-to-night walking outreach shift that most adult outreach providers use is not the way to go for youth. For youth outreach, it's more mobile. You want to be going from place to place. So you would be going from the mall to Kennedy Plaza to see where youth are. And I don't know, CJ, if you have anything you want to add here.
Yeah, I just want to echo a couple of things, right? So less likely to walk into service-based sites. These young people, in often cases, I recall meeting with high school students who are homeless, right? They don't want their friends to know they're homeless. And they don't even know the first step sometimes in where these service-based sites are located. And so this is why being out there is so key to informing, well, first off, locating, and then informing you that we exist. We're here to help you, right? The couch surfing piece is so important because a lot of young people do have friends, and oftentimes you find them kind of just staying on a friend's couch, right? A friend feels really bad, wants to help them out. but that's not sustainable, as we know. And then oftentimes what I'm seeing on my end is the friend is like, okay, it's starting to become too much and you can't pay me rent. This isn't working anymore. And so definitely thinking about like, do we do outreach at the mall? Like, has that ever happened? If not, we should start doing outreach at the mall, because you're gonna find youth there as well. And maybe figuring out what that looks like you can do at a later point. We can do it together, but I just wanted to echo that the less likely to walk in, we're not gonna find these youth by sitting behind our desks.
Oh no. Okay. So youth street outreach approach. So again, knowing where to go and know that they will not be easy to find or identify just by a quick glance. So usually what we tell or train people on for example, for the point in time count is looking for folks that happen to be carrying a backpack or a lot of bags, might be experiencing homelessness. That's not really a way to identify youth that are experiencing homelessness. You know, a lot of youth carry backpacks, whether they're homeless or not. So knowing where to go. And again, like I had said at the previous slide, once you know one, more will follow. It's, you know, once you build it, they will come, as they say. So again, having a regular and consistent presence in youth-centered spaces is key. So as CJ was saying, that because youth are less likely to know where the drop-in service-based sites are and go there, having a presence at youth-centered spaces. So like the foster forward space, like CJ and his team are there. They have a regular and consistent presence there. There are other youth-centered spaces where outreach can have a presence there. You can have joint outreach activities with multiple providers, whether that provider also provides outreach or not. Another youth serving provider can be a really good collaborative opportunity. Something that we want to keep in mind is having non-traditional partners. So that's really the way that we can find our youth, right? Since they're not coming into our traditional service sites, we're not finding them in the same traditional ways that we would our adults in our system. We really want to engage those non-traditional partners. So for example, we'll just stick with the mall example, right? So mall security, they might be a good place to start. If you connect with mall security and say, you know, CJ is from the hype team. This is what the hype does. This is what he's trying to do. Do you see regular kids here hanging out day after day? You know, XYZ. That could be a good partnership to really help you find and connect with folks there. So that can be a really good use of not only a collaborative approach, but using those non-traditional partners to engage youth. So again, meet youth where they're at, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. So not, you know, if they don't want to engage right away, taking that for what it is, letting them come to you, having that consistent presence really helps build that rapport and build that trust. Having that, letting them see your face over and over and over again, lets them see that you are trustworthy. And understanding street culture. So as CJ was saying, that youth, you know, they don't want their friends to know that they're homeless or their peers. So understanding that, you know, approaching them in a group of people, probably not the best way to do it. So really just being mindful about your approaches and how you're engaging with folks in a mindful and respectful, person-centered way, to not put the person on the spot, make them uncomfortable, make them have to out themselves in front of anyone. Can help you develop that trusting relationship. And something else I really wanted to highlight here for a youth street outreach approach is using peer-to-peer. So training peers and folks that are formerly homeless youth to serve as outreach workers. So if we can use and utilize the expertise of folks that have lived experience, that's key to build that rapport. Someone then that knows what it's like, that have been through the same thing, they are more likely to know this is where folks are going to hang out. This is their mentality. You know, I have the right idea of how to approach someone than someone who has just gotten, you know, someone that like me, I don't have lived experience of homelessness. So I take the lead from my peers that have the lived experience. I follow their lead on how to approach people, what the best practices are that way. So using that peer-to-peer approach is a lot easier for youth to engage, especially because they are so distrusting of adults. So I really wanted to highlight that here. CJ, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to build on that peer-to-peer outreach approach. You know, my lived experience is extensive, but this being one of them. And what I notice is that when youth, you first of all, when we're training peers, a part of training peers is making sure that peers aren't, divulging all of their personal life story to the people that they're working with, right? The clients that they're reaching out to. And that's all about boundaries and whatnot. But when a young person understands, at least vaguely, that you know what it's like to be in their shoes to some extent, that trust, that building of trust, that helps foster that building of trust, right? It helps that youth become comfortable with, sharing with you more about their experiences and then coming to you for requests for assistance or need. So it's really important that we start, when we look at hiring people or bringing on people to our team and outreach teams, that we start diligently raising up peers who were formerly homeless or experienced the foster care system or are LGBTQIA youth to serve as outreach workers, because these are those populations that are often not represented in the professional sense, right? There are not a lot of peer-to-peer professionals out there. And if we want to value that, if we want to say we value that, then we have to put our money where our value is, and kind of and build the team to reflect what we're saying. And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight is LGBTQIA plus youth, like myself. And I noticed that Rush is on the call. So I wanted to throw out a shout out to Youth Pride, because in my personal lived experience, and of course, as a professional later on, I had a lot of interactions with Youth Pride, AS220. And those were places that even I went as a young person, 16, 15, 17, to seek out assistance and support. And so, they're doing great work. And LGBTQ youth are also experiencing a wide array of issues involving homelessness for various other reasons, right? Being kicked out of the house, whatever the case may be. And so I'm hoping that we can, as providers, develop those interconnected relationships with one another, like Foster Forward and AS220, so that we can also meet youth where they're at, in those already designated safe spaces. And I know at one point HYPE was at AS220, and then COVID started to kind of ramp back up, and they were closed for a short period of time. So, but when we were meeting youth at AS220, and there were plenty of young people there who were experiencing some form of housing insecurity. And so, just wanted to put that shout out there.
Okay, so a little bit about the coordinated entry system. So coordinated entry serves all Rhode Islanders who are experiencing homelessness or who anticipate being homeless within the next 14 days. So like I had said at the very beginning of our presentation, this is those who are category 1 or 2. Folks that are experiencing category 4 homelessness, which is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, can also call coordinated entry, but there is a separate hotline for domestic violence calls. I unfortunately did not include that in these slides. So for coordinated entry, folks can call for diversion and preventive services. So if folks are expecting to be homeless within the next 14 days because they can't make rent, and all they owe is, they owe $200, and they'll have it next month, but they don't have it now. They can call diversion, see if there are the funds available, get it covered so that they don't have to enter our system at all. They don't have to experience homelessness because they can get that little portion covered and so that they can remain stably housed. Other folks call coordinated entry because they are experiencing homelessness, street homelessness. Folks can call and get a crisis assessment done. A crisis assessment will prioritize folks for emergency shelter or hotel. So there are emergency shelters throughout the state that folks can qualify for. It comes up on a first come, first serve basis, where if they're like whichever one has an availability first, that person will get a phone call saying there is a bed down in Newport. However, that person has the right to refuse if they don't want to go all the way down to Newport, can't get down to Newport, etc. Folks can also call coordinated entry and get a housing assessment done, which prioritizes them for housing, all type of housing in our system, whether it's rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing. So for the coordinated entry system and our call center, we have help center agents that are able to conduct all those assessments over the phone, refer them to other resources that could be available. Rhode Island is not a right to shelter state, so shelter is not guaranteed due to capacity. Like I was saying, they might have to wait a bit and get a call back when a bed becomes available. The coordinated entry phone number is on there, 401-277-4316. The line is open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., holidays and weekends, 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we currently have help center agents that speak 4 languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. So this is just like another little graphic about how coordinated entry works. So folks that are in need of assistance can enter the coordinated entry system. And if they call diversion, boom, check. They get that $200. Their rent is paid. They don't have to enter the system at all. They're good. If that's not the case, they get an assessment completed, that crisis assessment or the housing assessment, like I just mentioned, which means they get a referral to shelter or housing, respectively, which means that they then get prioritized for these 3 things: permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, mainstream housing services, or shelter. That just doesn't have a little arrow there. So for shelter services in Rhode Island, for youth, there depressingly is not much. House of Kodak provides emergency overnight shelter for youth ages 18 to 24. They have food and clothing pantry, a self-serve kitchen. I believe that service providers are on site there sometimes. However, House of Kodak does not participate through coordinated entry. So a youth would have to call House of Kodak directly, go on their website to gain access to their shelter, get on their wait list. So that's how folks would gain access to House of Kodak. That is the only shelter in Rhode Island that prioritizes youth. these are the shelters that are through coordinated entry system. So Crossroads has, emergency shelter, family shelter, women's shelter. House of Hope has Operation First Step. So that means it's not congregate shelter, which means that it's not a bunch of beds all in one room. It's multiple. It's
Yeah, it takes on a group home type setting. It's
Yeah.
not a group home, but it's basically just your traditional style apartment, 3-decker apartment, that, 4 rooms in each apartment kind of thing with case management on site.
awesome. Thank you, CJ. I was struggling a bit there. Amos House also has an Operation First Step and a family shelter, Community Care Alliance, emergency shelter, family shelter, and they very recently opened an LGBTQ plus shelter. Warm and Welcome House both have emergency shelters, and they have transitional housing. McKinney Shelter down in Newport is an emergency shelter. Lucy's Hearth, emergency shelter, family shelter, that's also down in Newport. Holy Family, Open Doors, and I just realized that Emmanuel House is not on here. That is also an emergency shelter. So these shelters are all for adults. So anyone over the age of 18 can go to these shelters. Call coordinated entry. They will get a crisis assessment done that prioritizes them for shelter. They will get asked questions about, I believe, what regions they want to go to. So if they don't want to go down to Newport, then they won't even receive referrals to McKinney, Lucy's, or anything like that. They'll only receive referrals to where they want to go to, where their community is. So anyone over the age of 18 can go to all of these shelters. However, youth are not prioritized for them, if that makes sense. For our housing services here in Rhode Island, again, the same, anyone over the age of 18 can call coordinated entry and do that housing assessment and get on lists for housing. However, I wanted to include youth-specific housing services that we have here in Rhode Island. There are also depressingly only a couple. Community Care Alliance has a rapid rehousing program, only has 4 beds, and you have to be category 1 homeless, which again is literally homeless, in an emergency shelter, in a hotel, a place not meant for human habitation, and willing to live in Northern Rhode Island, so up in the Woonsocket area. Or there is Foster Forward. So Foster Forward has 2 programs, one funded through the COC, the Continuum of Care, a rapid rehousing program that has 14 beds, and another rapid rehousing program funded through CHF, which is Consolidated Homeless Funds, that has 8 beds available. Through Foster Forward, you must be a former foster youth, and you must be experiencing category 1, 2, or 4 homelessness. So literally homeless, at risk of homelessness within 14 days, or fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. So only youth are prioritized for these rapid rehousing programs. So the way rapid rehousing works is it's 1 to 2 years program that they get into, and then hopefully the plan is that they move on to something more permanent. It's not guaranteed. I think we all know that there is a very significant lack of housing in our state right now. So unfortunately, because our youth are only prioritized for rapid rehousing, that means that our TAY youth, our 18 to 24-year-olds, are then put into the same waiting pool of our adults of fighting for those permanent supportive housing spots. So that comes to the end of our slides that we have prepared. So I think we're ready to take some questions. And I am going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see all of your beautiful faces.
So there was a question by, I think, so somebody had their hand up just a moment ago. I think it might have been,
That was me. Hello. Sorry, let me get my.
oh, Courtney.
Hi. So I did have a quick question. So with some of these slides, thank you so much for these amazing resources. This is incredible. I'm wondering, is there a way to access any of these on either of your web pages in case we either weren't writing fast enough and missed any, or to kind of look back at all?
Yes, so the slides will be available to I think Brianna Eller will send them out to you all next week. I'll make them available to her and she will send them out. So if you signed up for this training through, what is it, Eventbrite? And if you,
Sojo.
oh, through Sojo, okay. So if you are able to put your name and your email in the chat, I can make sure that you're on the list and to get the slides. So everyone who either signed up through Eventbrite or put your name and your email in the chat, you will get the slides beginning of next week.
Thank you.
And then there was a question in the chat by Marian. Did I say that right? It looks like she's on the phone. But she asked, what is the best approach to take when you have a youth who is from another state, but is afraid to return to that state? I'm wondering if we should wait for them to get off the phone. Okay, we can carry on until they're off the phone. I wanted to just mention that I put an image in the chat, which is an event coming up on Monday at 10 a.m. It is a rally and march in regard to homelessness in the state. I will be there. Some folks from House of Hope will be there. So I hope that folks can make some time on their Monday morning to get out there with the community and call on the government or the state to do more on behalf of these those who are homeless. One of the things that you noticed and Alex pointed out was that there doesn't exist much in our state for youth-specific housing or shelters. And it's a huge issue. And we also have college students who are homeless, and we have high school students who are homeless, and really nowhere to place them. So these direct action events are a part of pushing for that as well. Any questions? Any other questions from folks? All right. I just want to give a shout out to Adoption Rhode Island and Rhode Island Kids Count for helping to provide us with some information that you saw today.
Go ahead, Sam.
Thanks, Alex. First of all, I just want to thank both of you for hosting such a great training. You know, I think when you work with people who are experiencing homelessness, sometimes I think the younger people tend not to be as recognized. So I think the more that we can bring that to the forefront, the better. So thank you for doing this. And also the TED Talk that you guys had posted, is it possible to send the link for that? Because I thought that was a really powerful discussion.
Would you like me to put it in the chat? I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, CJ, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's also in the slides too. So when we send out when Brianna sends out the slides next week, you should be able to click it in there too. But CJ, if you can paste it in there now for folks, that would be great.
Awesome. Thank you.
What other questions do folks have?
I have a question about advocacy efforts and public officials. How are public officials right now responding to youth homelessness. I see so many different elected officials, and I do advocacy work on my side for different things as well. And I don't really see this as a platform. And I think that's sad. And I also think it's ignorant. So that being said, with both CJ and Alex having been really immersed in it, do you feel that it's getting any attention at all?
CJ, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, of course. Well, hold on a second. Oh, I'm not on mute. Okay. You know what?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say 20% recognition. The recent article that came out, I put the link in the chat for you, from Target 12, came out literally, what's today, the 30th? So it was yesterday at 5 o'clock. And it talks about new data reveals over half of Rhode Island foster children don't graduate. That's receiving some legislative attention, because legislators are recognizing how that kind of ties into the issue of homelessness as well. In the sense that, like, we have young people who are homeless and aren't going to school because they're homeless, right? But there are people at the State House, and I won't speak for them, but there are people at the State House, a few that I know of, who are passionate about this issue. I discovered legislation that was put through the House in last January, to address the issue of homeless college students or homeless foster youth wanting to go to college. And, it was to create a scholarship program for them, that they could go and get their housing paid for, et cetera, et cetera. It died in May. It never left the House. Why? Because it was Republican backed, right? So we have the issue where, like, options for solutions on the legislative level are coming out, but in this particular case, it got shut down. Why? Because of bureaucracy, right? Because, it was Republican. And I reviewed the bill yesterday, actually, with Adoption Rhode Island and someone from Rhode Island College, to make changes to it, because we felt that the legislation was actually exactly what we've been discussing. But to answer your question in short, it's not something that is widely discussed. I don't know why, but it's definitely my mission here at the House of Hope and Generous Heart, our mission at Generous Heart, to bring awareness to those very real issues involving youth and youth homelessness, and really start holding people accountable for creating programs and resources and solutions that are going to be long lasting.
Yeah. I was just kind of looking around at that, and it's just like, where is that? And, looking at the schools, and, I'm a person with lived experience myself, and my daughter was very young, and, she had to go through that route with me as well. And same with my son. And even on the school level, there's nothing. It's like, I think that's the thing that is so tough and frustrating, is because they hear that a family's experiencing homelessness, and apparently homelessness is only an issue during a canned food drive during Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, and I feel like that's the way that the schools have been tackling it. And I just was wondering if you guys saw any legislation to start tying in, like, school resources to, to out in the community, where, we're not just giving them food in a laundry basket, that we are actually advocating for them in the schools so they can actually study better, so the systemic brokenness, that is in our system and inside their school and outside of their school, it can start dissolving, but it's, to kind of see the lack is, I'm preaching to the choir, right? But to see the lack is frustrating. So.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, to address the issue of school resources, what school resources,
Right.
I've had high school social workers working in the school coming to me and saying, in one unique case, she even stepped out like well beyond what she was required to do and put this high schooler with her mother on her mom's couch, right? Like, you know, she's staying with my mother. It's, you know, she's like, I feel bad. And there's these a lot of times, and I won't speak for every school social worker, but a lot of times they don't really go out in the community.
Yes.
They are at the school, and if there are no resources at the school, they're coming to us, and we're like, well, we need resources from them at the hit. Like it's a serious lack of resources. But I feel that anytime that you are speaking on the subject of homelessness, anytime you're at an event, anytime that you are mentioning anything about homelessness in Rhode Island, always be sure to bring up transition age youth and youth homelessness, because that is a part of it. And I'm hoping that the more we advocate for this, the more we'll see solutions. And one of the things I wanted to let everyone know, including you, Samantha, is that I co-chair the COC Family Tay committee that meets, I believe on Thursday, every other Thursday or once a month. I'll find you the specific day. It stays in my calendar and I just join it when it happens. But if you're interested in being a part of that committee where we talk about youth homelessness, transition age youth and families, and try to, we discuss these very issues and try to figure out ways in which we can build solutions. I'm happy to share that meeting info with you guys.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be fantastic.
I think that maybe Alex can get me emails for folks that are interested in the Family Tay stuff. And then Rush asked a question. Are there 501c4 groups that can help advocate, build out lobby days, etc.? Alex, do you have any idea on that?
I have no idea.
Me neither. I don't think, Rush, that I've ever heard of a 501c4 currently doing that work. Area for improvement need. But yeah.
All right, thank you. I didn't know if it was something that had been mentioned a little bit earlier. I had to take a call, so apologies.
No worries, Rush. I don't think I have anything else. I know that we're totally almost, we're ending like an hour early. Anybody else want to discuss what you're doing, what you're seeing in your role?
I'm wondering if y'all have suggestions or things that have worked for working with the schools. I'm finding that, yeah, like you were saying, the schools are often under-resourced, and yeah, do you have suggestions about that?
Yeah, one of the difficult things that I've had to learn how to do is, unfortunately, because where capacity is not where we would hope it could be in terms of case management and providing support, but sometimes I just have to tell school social workers, like, because they want to refer. That's typically what school social workers are doing. They're referring, right? They're referring out of the school to out of school services. And oftentimes I have to tell them, like, I don't have the capacity on my caseload at the moment, but here's a few other places you could check. And it feels like all roads lead to a dead end sometimes. And so, I mean, we even have, right now, we have a waiting list for HYPE, kind of a running waiting list to get a case manager through us. And we are, with YHGP and whatnot, we are hiring soon more case managers, et cetera. But yeah, I wish I had, I really wish that I had more helpful information for you in regard to like helping school social workers figure it out, but we're all kind of in the same boat. I think, Alex, do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I unfortunately don't have a lot of experience working with schools.
And, and it's not just, let's just like let's think about it for a moment, right? It's not just high schools, it's colleges, right? I was recently I've been discussing the issue of college age homelessness since back in last November now, almost a year. And only a couple of weeks ago did I finally have a meeting with the post-secondary commissioner or the commissioner of post-secondary ed, and URI and CCRI and Rhode Island College, Kids Count, Adoption Rhode Island, and various other federal and state partners. And we're on this meeting, and URI is saying, we have a huge problem with homelessness on campus. And CCRI is saying, we have a huge problem with homelessness on campus, but we have no dorms. Can we send them to Rick? And Rick is saying, we have a huge problem with homelessness on campus, right? And all of these colleges, for some reason, feel they need to come up with the solutions in their own silos when we really don't want that. And we want to work with them to develop sustainable solutions that work for everyone. But it's not just high school. It is literally happening at the college level. College students are dropping out because they're homeless. And how do you go to class, but you can't shower, and you're worrying about where you're going to put your head at night, and you don't have access to food. And the resources on the street, and I know this is seeming a bit depressing, are so minimal that you just feel like you're on your own. And so, when we think about school, let's think about high school and college, but there is advocacy efforts in the works to bring awareness and attention to this issue. And there are some legislative efforts going on to hopefully bring some policy change to address the issue. But just join us in that effort, and whether it's in your own respective spaces and bringing awareness to this, or if you're leadership at a program or an agency, like, make this a part of your work and integrate it into your your programs. The other thing too is that Family Tay meeting that I have is also a place. It's a good place for providers and professionals to just kind of share resources too. So if someone knows that of something that others didn't, we kind of share in that meeting, take advantage of whatever new resources came to be.
Are there any other questions? Okay, if you haven't already, please put your name and your email in the chat, not only to record your attendance so that you can get your certificate for attending the training, but so that you can receive the slides as well. There is a feedback form that will be sent out to you all through the Eventbrite, I believe. Should I just post it in the chat, CJ, since not everyone signed up through the Eventbrite? Okay, I'm just gonna do that.
That's fine.
Okay. So anyway, I'm just gonna paste the feedback form here. It is only 10 questions. It's anonymous. If you wouldn't mind filling this out for us, that would be amazing. And yeah, thank you all so much for attending, for your thoughtful comments and your questions. And thank you to CJ, my co-presenter. Very honored and grateful to present with you, my friend.
Thank you, Alex, so much. And thank you everyone for making some time today. I'm glad we were kind of able to end a little earlier for you. And I did put my email in the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. If you want to be a part of that Family Tay meeting, you can also send me an email directly and I'll share with you the calendar invite.
Awesome. All right. Take care, everyone. Enjoy having an hour back in your day.
thank you so much. I enjoyed everything, and all the information that you guys gave was very, very helpful. Moving forward, I have like a better, sense of what's really going on,
Mhm.
and I can apply this, to people that I know, friends and families that's actually going through this. And this is this has been awesome. I appreciate you guys' work, and there should be more people like you out there. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people that understand people in need. I ran into like so many people that's just like, they just don't understand. They misread. The youths especially are misunderstood, very much so. So, I come from a place where, I didn't, I see a lot of poor people, and, people on the street, homeless people. I work at a security company, but, downtown Providence, and I see a lot of it, drug abuse. And, I just feel so sorry for these people. And I understand that there's like not a lot of resources out there. And, you know, um, and just learning about this stuff, and you know how I can approach people, that's, and give them some information that I've learned today to help them, just personally. So I appreciate you guys very much, and this has been very informational for me on my part. So moving forward, I will be helping more people, and I'm happy that I attended this training.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate
Thank
it so much.
you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care.
You too. Bye. Hello.